Welcome to the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nat Green, and I'm so excited to have you join me as we discuss what it means to navigate your way through post-traumatic growth and not just survive, but to thrive after trauma. Through our podcast, we will explore ways for you to create a life filled with greater purpose, self-awareness, and a deep inner peace. Through integrating the many years of knowledge and professional experience, as well as the wisdom of those who have experienced trauma firsthand, we will combine psychology, accelerated approaches, coaching, and personal experience to assist you to learn, to grow, and to thrive. I hope to empower you to create deeper awareness and understanding and stronger connections with yourself and with others, whilst also paving the way for those who have experienced trauma and adversity to reduce their suffering and become the very best versions of themselves in order to thrive. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I'm super excited today to bring you our next guest on the Growing Tall Poppies podcast. It's my absolute pleasure and privilege to welcome a wonderful lady and my beautiful friend, Erin Davis, to chat with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Nat. I'm so excited to be here, and it's such a privilege to be on your show. So thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Let me introduce you, Erin, to our audience, our beautiful listeners. So Erin Davis is an OCD therapist and relationship coach who helps women break free from worry, build lasting confidence, and open the door to deep love in their romantic relationships. She's been featured in Healthline and is also the host of the 5-star show Bossing Up, Overcoming OCD, which is available on all major podcast platforms. And she also has over a decade of experience empowering women to reclaim control and confidence in their lives. She's based in North Carolina, and Erin provides personalised therapy and relationship coaching to help people create peace, presence, and true connection. So, yes, it's wonderful to have you here. And as I said, I'm so grateful and feel so blessed to be able to have our listeners and myself to hear your story and also for you to share your amazing wisdom.
Awesome. Well, that bio, it gives me chills because it doesn't feel like me. So it's really cool.
Isn't it fantastic when we hear things read back to us and we go, oh, is that really me? Have I done that?
Right. Yeah. Just doing the day to day, and then all of a sudden that day to day becomes over a decade.
Amazing. Yes. Time flies when we're having fun. So
yes.
What I might just start with then, Erin, is can you give us in your beautiful words an introduction of who you are and what you do in the world? Because I'm sure you could say so much more than that little brief introduction.
Well, my story, I'm married, happily married for 15 years. I've got 3 boys. Also, I'm a dog mama. My dog is a certified therapy dog, so she goes with me to work, and it's just fabulous. And I primarily specialize in OCD work because so many women struggle with OCD and don't realize it. And more often than not, OCD gets misdiagnosed. And it can be completely missed altogether. And early on in my work as a therapist, I noticed that there were so many ladies having quote unquote anxiety, and it wasn't getting resolved with the traditional like cognitive behavioral methods. So it wasn't getting cured. And so in digging deeper in that, I was discovering that, oh, they're having a full-blown OCD episode. This is the cycle. I'm seeing the worry of, am I with the right person, or how do I know they love me? And all these compulsive behaviors of checking their socials, checking their texts, wanting reassurance. And I'm like, this is not your typical anxiety, because yeah, anxiety may be present, but I was seeing this was much more than that. And so from there, that's when I started specializing in OCD. And throughout the years, I just see more and more women struggling with this and not realizing it. But once they have that clarity and the information, they just have an epiphany of like, oh my gosh, I thought OCD was all hand washing and germs
Mm.
and organization. I'm like, no, hun. Like, it's more than that. It can be a different shade, a different color, and you can still shine brightly even with having such a disabling disorder as OCD. So, it's definitely a passion of mine to help bring more information and more ladies to clarity.
What a fantastic summary of OCD because, as you said, most of us, and I have a background in clinical psychology, so the way we're trained is it really is a lot of the time around that checking, double checking, triple checking, hand washing type of thing, rather than recognizing that it can really go across all areas and show up so significantly in our relationships.
Yes. And
Yes.
even the research shows that when you have the theme of relationship OCD, you typically have more distress than the other OCD themes. So, even more of a reason because we are humans, we are designed for connection and relationships. And it's a shame that OCD robs and can rob so many women of beautiful relationships.
Mm. Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I can't imagine the type of stories that you've heard, knowing that you can help these people and they've suffered for so many years, not knowing. So I can imagine the
Yes.
epiphany when you shine a light on, hang on, this is what it really is, and this is how I can help you.
Right, exactly. And it's so incredible because in the conversations I have with these ladies, I'm not telling them to break up with their partner. I'm not forcing them to go on dates with people. I'm helping them lean into their truth and get to know like their real selves and learn to trust themselves and their senses to help bring about a life that's already beautiful and within their reach. So it's very different than the way you talk to your girlfriends, right? Because your girlfriends be like,
Mm.
they're gossiping, they're telling you to break up with them, they're telling you this, they're telling you that. And even if you're trying to get validation from your mom, I mean, she's going to take your side no matter what. And so it's all well meaning advice when you're talking to your family and your friends, but when you're working with an OCD therapist such as myself, we know the game that OCD is trying to play. And so
Absolutely.
we can help you stay in. I can help you stay in that relationship as long, obviously, I feel like there's always a caveat, as long as it's not an abusive relationship,
Yes, of
right?
course.
But, with the relationship OCD, they feel they want 100% certainty, 100% guarantee. And the amazing part is that, like, I'll have a woman who is engaged to be married. She's super worried, super nervous, like, how do I know I found the one? And through our work together, she gets to a place of picking out her wedding dress with ease. And
Wow.
every time it happens, it gives me chills because it's just so rewarding.
Oh, it must be to know that you've played just a small part in their happiness and their future and shown them that it can be so different to the life they thought they were signing up for.
Right, right. And the other thing I want to mention about OCD is that about 1 in 40 adults in the United States develop OCD at some point in their lives. So if you
Wow.
look at that number, you translate that 1 in 40, that's almost as many people as living in New York City.
Oh my goodness. When you put it in those terms, like obviously I'm in Australia, but I have a lot of guests that are in America and even us over here know, wow, we know how big New York is. If we've been there, it's huge and bustling. So that just puts things in perspective.
Yes, and to think that it's missed 50% of the time,
Exactly.
like insane. So
Oh,
I'm just happy to be doing what I'm doing and helping more and more people, which is also why I transitioned into coaching to help reach more people by offering a group coaching program just to get so many ladies together and in community to help support one another, which, we can totally talk about.
yeah. And I imagine that someone with OCD feels very isolated and alone. And
Oh,
often,
completely.
yeah, they keep it a secret because they're embarrassed or ashamed or they don't really know what's going on. And they think that whole thought process of there's something wrong with me. I'm bad. I'm
Right.
defective.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, as we know, Erin, with my guest interviews, I talk to people around their trauma or adversity that they may have had in their life and how they navigated their experience and any lessons or learnings from their experience and have them share pearls of wisdom. And what we often know, as I've had some brilliant, amazing guests on our show,
Hmm.
is that we get into the work we get into because we have a backstory and an area of interest. So I'm wondering if you felt that it was okay if you could share an overview of what's happened for you and led you to working in the OCD field.
Sure. Well, and my story has evolved, which I think is also something I help other women come to realize, like to be flexible, right? Our life is not linear in any
No.
means. So, in my childhood and teenage years, like I was subject to a lot of abuse and abuse that I did my own therapy work and healing around. But that still didn't help me in my relationships and connections as I got older and was dating. And I remember I had this long term boyfriend in high school, and it was just, repulsive and just a terrible partner. But because of my shame and guilt and low self worth, I was in that headspace of what if I don't find anyone else? What if
Mm.
this is it?
Mm.
Even though I'm in high school, like there's a whole world out there, and I prayed for someone like my husband, and I wanted to know. I would even ask God, just tell me what his first name is. Just even his first name. Like I wanted to know who my forever was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember with my ex-boyfriend, the abusive guy, we were driving down the highway. We had been dating 4 years at this point, and the Rascal Flatts song comes on the radio. You know Rascal Flatts?
Yep, yep. I'm familiar
Yeah.
with it a long time ago, but yes.
Yes. So totally love country music over here. So in the chorus, they're singing, "My wish for you is that this life becomes all that you want it to. Your dreams stay big, your worries stay small.
Hmm.
You never need to carry more than you can hold. And while you're out there getting where you're getting to, I hope you know somebody loves you and wants the same things too." So
Wow.
a light bulb goes off in my mind because all of a sudden, like I'd been caught up in this story for years of what if I don't find someone else? What if I don't find someone
Mm.
else? And then hearing this song of, someone loves you and they want the same things too. Like you have big dreams, your worries stay small. And I just really felt this wave come over me. And I looked over at him and I said, "Do you think we want the same things?" You know what he
Oh,
said?
oh, I can't imagine.
He was like, "Yeah, I think so." I'm like, "What do you mean you think so?"
Mm.
And I'm like, "Okay, all right. Well, you tell me what does that look like?" And he said, "Well, I think we'll live together and see how it goes." I'm like,
Oh.
"Oh my gosh." Like I am not doing any more trial run stuff here. If you don't know that I'm the one, like I'm
Mm.
not I'm not hanging around. So, luckily, I broke up with him, and that was the light bulb moment I needed to
Mm.
end it. And not too long after that, I met my husband, and it's been like any relationship. That was one thing I learned too, is that even if there are conflicts, it doesn't mean that your relationship is doomed.
Absolutely not. Yes.
And my husband has been my rock, and he has been so good to me. I'm beyond blessed to have my husband, and he's just the best guy in the world and the best father. So it's really been a joy having him in my life, and he's very supportive of my dreams too. So I think about that moment a lot, and that was a very
Mm.
pivotal moment for me.
Absolutely. Really, that light bulb sledgehammer moment almost, that whole, wow, am I going to settle for this? Or am I going to honor me and,
Right.
and aim for more? So, with that relationship worry that had been there prior to this, and then you met the ex boyfriend, and 4 years of your
Mm-hmm.
life of all that worry, at what point did you realize that maybe it wasn't just a normal, whatever normal is, who knows what the normal is, level of worry in a relationship, that it might have been more significant anxiety stemming from past traumas and things?
Honestly, that realization didn't come until my adulthood and specializing in OCD because, as you know, when clients are sharing things, you get supervision early on, but I noticed it was definitely triggering some stuff in me. And so, again, just in digging deeper and really understanding, getting a clearer picture of how the obsessions can take a different form and then the compulsions, how they look in a cycle.
Mm.
So it was honestly in my adulthood when I realized, like, oh boy, I was really having a battle there that would have been really nice to have a therapist by my side. And that was
Mm.
one of the things I wanted to mention too is that I became a therapist to be a voice for people that I wish I had, or a mentor that I wish I had to process all this stuff because it was very lonely.
Oh, yeah. And very powerful to think you could see in hindsight what would have helped you, where you could
100%.
have benefited, and then use that experience to pay it forward. So, as we know, Erin, people, when they go through trauma, like most of my listeners, they spend lots of time in their head thinking, overthinking, overanalyzing, and their
For sure.
perception of themselves will change over time as a result of the overthinking.
Mm-hmm.
And that can often then lead to them withdrawing from their relationships, feeling differently in their relationships, or settling for relationships that are less than, like you did, unknowingly,
Mm-hmm.
than what you were comfortable with or ultimately deserved. And
Yeah.
then that significant anxiety comes out and then will show up in the OCD things. So, as a result of that realization for you, what do you think were the key things that you noticed starting to come up in your clients?
Mm-hmm. Mm. Well, it very much mimicked my own life, where, first of all, it's an avoidance of sharing your truth or using I statements of any kind because I didn't want to upset my husband, you know? So, and what I didn't realize was avoidance is also a compulsion. Like,
Interesting. Yeah. Maybe we
uh-huh.
should dig a little deeper there, because I think when people have gone through trauma or adversity, we do avoid
Oh,
because
yeah.
it's painful, it's hard, it's challenging, or we're worried all the time. So tell us a bit more about that.
Hmm. Yes, and that's where also too, like a therapist who is not trained in OCD, they may see it as simply a trauma response. And it totally could be. It could be overlapping. But the avoidance is I don't want to make people mad. I don't want to bring up this conversation. And in my clients, I see a lot of they will avoid a relationship altogether because they're like, I'm not sure how I can handle someone being in my bed. I'm not sure how I can handle like having someone sit with me on the couch because
Mm,
they've got all sorts of thoughts going on. But for some of them, there's no trauma in their background. Like, so
yeah.
we know it's 100% pure OCD. But,
Hmm.
in my case, um, yeah, I had a lot of avoidance. And the other thing I've learned with OCD that I see in my clients, and I give them fair warning too, is that OCD is a shapeshifter. So once you resolve one part of it, it's going to try to pop up in another way. And so for
Yes.
me, once I was, and in looking back, like once I was out of that fear of what if I don't find the one? What if I don't find someone? Once I'd found the one, I thought everything was great and good, but it wasn't because then the fear became, well, how do I know he loves me?
Mm,
And so I
yeah.
was looking for reassurance looking back, and it's just, I want to hit my head against the wall because I'm like, I was just doing so many things of trying to check if he loved me that
Mm,
it really created some false narratives and it wasn't healthy, wasn't helpful. And so that epiphany for me really came about 4 years ago when I just, honestly, it was almost like a spiritual situation where just kind of hit a place in my marriage and I'm doing a lot of praying and I just felt the Lord tell me surrender.
okay.
Like just stop.
Wow.
Just stop all the checking and stop all the behaviors. Like just surrender.
Oh,
And
you
like,
goosebumps then, got chills. So tell me about
yeah.
that.
Yeah, so okay, personal story and you don't have to air this, so we'll just kind of play it by ear, but with all the reassurance seeking that I was doing with my husband, does he love me? Does he love me? I somehow had in my head that if we are living away from family and it's just he and I, then he's really going to be all about me. And if we move back close to family, he's going to be distracted and he's not going to love me as much. He's going to forget about
Mm,
me. And so it was definitely a friction in our marriage because, well, it was a friction. It was a friction point. Let me say that.
mm,
It was a friction point because, he wanted to raise his kids in the country of North Carolina. And at the time, we were living in the DC area where it's keeping up with the Joneses. It's very busy,
mm,
hustle and bustle. I mean, you work hard, and
mm.
it's very little time for family life.
Okay.
So, but we were both working round the clock. Daycare was like paying for private school.
Mm,
And so, anyway, it just hit a point where when I felt in that prayer and in that situation, the Lord told me to surrender. It was like I could trust that everything was going to be okay.
mm,
That I told my husband, like, all of a sudden, I said, we can move back to North Carolina. And he was like, are you sick? Like, what happened? Because for so long, I had my heels in the ground of like, no, we're going to live on our own. We're going to live away and we're going to do this thing.
mm.
But I just felt the Lord tell me to surrender. And I did. And it was a great choice. And I continue to be vigilant with my prayers of calming my mind, helping me surrender, and just trusting in Him that everything's going to be okay.
Wow. So trusting in him, definitely huge,
Mm.
but sounds like trusting in yourself as well. Yes, asking for
Yes.
something from a higher power.
Yes.
And I know past guests definitely have talked about their experiences from a spiritual perspective, whatever that means for them. And that is huge in the transition from trauma to post traumatic growth. That's
Hmm.
definitely a common factor that I've seen with my guests. But in that, there's really a trust of yourself, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I learned how my husband still loves me and I'm still his number one, even if he's got his family, his
Mm.
friends, his hobbies, you know? So it's a much better situation overall.
Yeah, so that epiphany and that moment and turning point for you was very similar to what a lot of your clients will have after they've worked with you. And I know one of the other things that comes up is comparisonitis. We often see that. So, can you explain what comparisonitis is and why it's so common in relationships and particularly for someone with OCD?
Love the question because comparisonitis is the thief of joy for anyone, anybody. And what tends to happen, especially with social media, is my clients, time and time again, which, I'll get into some of the methods that I walk them through. They will go on social media, they're scrolling Instagram, and even though they have a solid, loving relationship, they're seeing all these other couples having romantic getaways or these fancy dinners or these grand gestures of, I mean, even going to prom these days. Oh my gosh, it's a whole ordeal just asking another kid to go to prom. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so when they're seeing all of these things on social media, that doubt starts to creep in of why isn't our relationship like that?
Mm.
And again, it's so easy to do with the comparison. And so then they start to have that, what I call obsessional doubt. And we can talk about that next.
Mm-hmm.
But that obsessional doubt then drives them to try to have this perfect relationship where they feel like their partner is doing all of these great, grand, wonderful things, but that's not who your partner was originally. Your
Yeah.
partner is someone who totally adores you, but they're not going to be the grand gestures. They're not going to be, I don't know, what would you call it? Like some Instagram all star. Like they're
Mm.
just their everyday selves. So they're not about the showboating.
Yeah, exactly. And the
And
reality is, often, as we know, social media presents in one way. That's not how real life is for the majority of people. And that's
yes,
part of the big part of the issue, isn't it, really?
right. And with OCD, a lot of times the women already know that it doesn't make logical sense, but OCD doesn't care.
It-
Yeah. And that's where it clouds your relationship or it clouds the feelings that you have. And you all of a sudden forget like why you love them or you forget how special the connection is because you're comparing to other couples, to other relationships. And so it pulls you away from that genuine connection and you're chasing an unrealistic standard because OCD never stops. That's the problem.
And that's absolutely one of the key problems. It's there all the time, isn't it? Until
Yes.
you do the work to learn the secrets to help overcome it. But it's still going to be there. It's this constant understanding of what you need to do. So you mentioned about obsessive doubts. So what's the difference between obsessive doubts and reasonable doubts in a relationship?
Right. Yes. So, as we all are human, we have doubts from time to time. And normally, when we experience doubts, like a curiosity or there's a question, we're unsure about something, we will go seek the answer. Now, someone without OCD, once they get the answer, once they get the information, they are resolved. They have found their resolution and they can move on. But with obsessive doubts, this is another level of doubts where You are feeling like you're in a constant state of anxiety or uncertainty. And it makes it very difficult to have peace because even if you get the information, OCD says, yes, but
Mm,
it
yeah.
finds a loophole. And it's this doubt driven cycle that just drains you and thus drains your relationship. So it erodes on that genuine connection over time.
And there's that constant reassurance seeking that will play out in the relationship, that obsessiveness, the obsessive doubts, the comparisonitis, and constantly seeking reassurance, like you said, was happening in your relationship with your husband. How does
Hmm.
that hurt the relationship? And what would be a healthier approach?
Oh my gosh, such a good question because when you're asking for reassurance over and over, like, and Nat, you've probably been there at some point or another too. So when someone is asking for reassurance, and they're doing this reassurance seeking behavior, what they're doing is they're asking the same question or a similar variation of the question multiple times, even though their partner or their loved one has already answered it. And imagine if you've asked your husband to go get milk from the store. All right, he comes back home and he's got the milk, he puts it in the fridge, and you ask him, "Did you go get milk?" And he's like, "Yeah, totally did." And you're like, "But are you sure you got it? Are you sure you got the right kind?" Like, imagine how frustrating that would be for him. It's like, "Oh my gosh, woman, I got the milk. Like,
Don't you
what else do
trust
you
me?
want from me?" Yes. Yes. So, and that's just an example of milk. Like, imagine if it's a much deeper concern
Yeah.
of, how do I know if you're the one for me? How do you know we're going to be compatible in 10 years? And like questions like that, like OCD loves to ask questions
Mm,
that are almost unanswerable, if I'm being honest,
yes,
because they're
absolutely.
very far fetched. And the further you get from reality, the more uncertainty you're going to have. And OCD thrives on wanting certainty.
Mm,
So it really puts you in an impossible situation and also your partner. So that reassurance seeking is very hurtful for your relationship. And what I help my clients do is, number one, encourage them to not ask for reassurance. So what they do is they ask their question one time. I'm like, it's okay to ask for information.
mm-hmm.
Okay. Like you can ask
Yeah.
for information, that's fine, but you can only ask one time. So, in essence, what we're doing, it's a series of strategies to delay, skip, and decrease these
Mm-hmm.
compulsions. So, if they really want the reassurance, maybe delay it 5 minutes. See how you can handle that. So you start to build your tolerance over time for this discomfort, and by doing that, it turns down the volume on the OCD. So, at
Mm.
first, it can feel very loud and uncomfortable. But what's amazing is once they practice this over and over, the delay, skip, and decrease, they feel like, well, these thoughts don't even bother me anymore. They're just passing thoughts.
What a fabulous strategy. And I can see why you get the results you get with your
Thank you.
clients, just the level of personal experience, but then coupled with all the training you've had and the information you've got from working with clients. And I know you've developed your own method. So I would
Yes.
love for you to tell us about your method, and then we'll talk more about where people can find you and your group coaching program. So tell me about your peace method.
Oh, fabulous question. Yeah. And just through the years, to kind of simplify things and really hit the high notes of what these ladies are looking for, I developed my peace method. And each letter represents its own category of things that we're working on and using throughout our work together. So, P is for practice. So, we're practicing the skills and I'm teaching them the techniques that they need to continue to practice routinely. And again, they're very surprised at how hard it is in the beginning compared to how easy it is once they continue to practice.
Mm.
So, uh, then E is for evidence because with determining any decision, we can only go off of the information that we have at the time. Just
Yes.
like in a courtroom, you can only prove something with evidence. And so that really is a great way to help boss up to the OCD because when you start presenting evidence, the rest of it just falls away.
Excellent. So you
And
really encourage that. Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? And keep going back to
exactly,
you must have evidence. Otherwise, it's not real.
exactly. And
Yeah.
that's part of the method too, because A is for acknowledge, where we can acknowledge and be aware of where our mind is going and acknowledge, like, oh, I've stepped into the OCD bubble and I'm going to cross the bridge back over into reality. And
Hmm.
so, really acknowledging that you have to be vigilant with your thoughts and how you communicate to your partner. And then C is for contentment because time and time again, that's what the ladies want. They're like, I just want to be content. I'm not even
Mm.
looking for happiness. Like, I just want to be content.
Yeah.
And I totally get it. Like, they just want to be satisfied in their
Mm.
relationship. And finally, E is for empowerment because it's all about taking ownership of your emotions and feeling like you are in control again and that OCD doesn't call the shots.
Wow, it sounds like such a powerful approach. And I know that you've said, you've worked for the last decade and some to keep seeing people one on one, but this problem is so big and so much more than that, with 1 in 40 people experiencing OCD,
Right.
and knowing that 50% aren't even diagnosed or aren't even aware that OCD is a
Yes.
problem. So you mentioned that to counteract some of that and to make a bigger difference and pay it
Yes.
forward in the world, which is really part of your mission. And I'm so excited for you about what lies ahead. You've
Thank
started
you.
a group coaching program, and I believe it's called Obsess Less, Love More. Correct
You
me if I'm
got it.
wrong. Is that right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'd love for you to tell our listeners, who I'm sure will have experienced varying degrees of relationship issues, and no doubt they're relating to this, going, oh my God, maybe I do have relationship OCD and I didn't even know. So tell us about
Mm-hmm.
your group program.
Awesome. Well, so my Obsess Less, Love More program is all about breaking free from these cycles of obsessive thoughts and helping you build self confidence in yourself and in your relationship. And what I love about the group environment is that you're going to be with other women who also identify with OCD driving these unhelpful behaviors and these false narratives. And so we're going to get to the root cause of the relationship doubts. And through the coaching, through the community, they're going to have tools and strategies and a built in support system to help them with their relationship so that they can just stop all this anxiety and really step into a place where they are thriving in their relationships. And I think it's just going to be beautiful to see where this goes in like even 10 years from now because these methods, these tools are powerful. And I see it on the
Mm.
1-to-1 scale all the time. And I can't wait to bring it to more ladies because ultimately it empowers them to approach love with clarity and confidence and peace.
Oh. And really, we all want peace. And I just love the way you've used the letters of peace to really represent exactly what you're offering.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. So I feel like we've gone right around, and we've learnt so much about you and you've shared so many gold nuggets already. If you could share one thing with our listeners that would help them as they navigate their post trauma or adversity experiences and help them move into post traumatic growth, what would that be?
Okay. Well, I would start by saying I understand how it can feel easy to get overwhelmed and that things feel like a lot and you don't know the next step forward. And so, my advice would be to remind yourself that love is built on little moments, and love is all about small, consistent action over time. It's not about perfection. So, every time a doubt creeps in, try to shift that focus, that spotlight on where you're giving your time, energy, and attention, and really focus it on the things that serve your energy. So that might be gratitude, it might be the things that are going well in your relationship, and ultimately try to focus on the positives versus fixating on what's missing because,
Mm.
again, love is built with small, consistent action over time.
Oh, I love that so much. Now, that's a gold nugget. We all need to write that down. I absolutely love that. So,
Thank you.
we're nearing the end of the episode, and I would really love for you to share with everyone how they can find you.
Okay. Well, I've got lots of social media channels going on these days. So, first, I would start with my podcast, The Bossing Up Overcoming OCD, because at least the last dozen episodes have been focused on relationship OCD. And I see it continuing because I'm seeing a huge rise in downloads. So, I feel like I'm really on to something here with the relationship OCD because more and more people are listening and finding it to be true in their lives. So you can find my Bossing Up Overcoming OCD show on all the major podcast platforms. And then I would also check out my YouTube channel, and the handle is Erin Davis YouTube. That's ERIN. And you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram at Erin Davis Coaching.
Excellent. And I'll put everything in the show notes so it makes it easier for everyone to find you. And oh my goodness, I can highly recommend your podcast. I've been binging listening to the last few episodes over the last week and I'm loving them. You're a wealth of information and such a joy to listen to. So,
Well,
yeah,
thank you.
thank you. I've really enjoyed that.
Well, and one last thing I wanted to mention for your listeners, I've got a checklist of 10 signs of relationship OCD. So I'm happy to pass along that
Oh, thank you.
information to your listeners.
Oh, that would be fabulous. Because I think that we'll
Mm-hmm.
look at that checklist and I think that many of us will check a lot more than we expect we will on that checklist.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one thing I always like to wind up with is what do you think your younger self would think of everything that you've achieved?
Oh my gosh, she would be so proud that she has stepped into her power, her voice, and she's actually helping people. You know, that's a beautiful question. Thank you.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much again for being on the podcast and sharing all this valuable information. Is there anything else you would like to share or say to our listeners?
Well, so just a final words. Practice your affirmations because they matter, and really lean in to the real you because OCD is going to try to trick you into believing this feared self, but that's not your truth. Your truth is in the real you, and you know who that is. And that real you is a good person. And lean into that and don't let anything take that from you.
I love that so much. Thank you again, Erin, for coming on the show and sharing the space with me and for letting us share all of this with our listeners. I'm so grateful. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nat. This was wonderful, and I really appreciate, again, the opportunity to speak with you and just hold space with you.
Thank you. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Growing Tall Poppies. It is my deepest hope that today's episode may have inspired and empowered you to step fully into your post-traumatic growth so that you can have absolute clarity around who you are, what matters the most to you, and to assist you to release your negative emotions and regulate your nervous system so you can fully thrive. New episodes are published every Tuesday, and I hope you'll continue to join us as we explore both the strategies and the personal qualities required to fully live a life of post-traumatic growth and to thrive. So if it feels aligned to you and really resonates, then I invite you to hit subscribe, and it would mean the world to us if you could share this episode with others who you feel may benefit too. You may also find me on Instagram at Growing Tall Poppies and Facebook, Dr. Natalie Green. Remember, every moment is an opportunity to look for the lessons and to learn and increase your ability to live the life you desire and deserve. So for now, stay connected, stay inspired, stand tall like the tall poppy you are, and keep shining your light brightly in the world. Bye for now.